Welcome to the podcast, The Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Keith D. Terry, a consultant, a coach, and a serial entrepreneur. The mission here is to teach, inspire, and to motivate. You know, in this episode, we have a special guest. We have Mr. Keith Glantz, and we're going to be talking about the art of brand elevation from storytelling to design thinking. You know, Keith is the president and creative officer of Glantz, formerly Glantz Design. But before I really give you his background, I have a few words to say about storytelling. You know, the history of storytelling is as ancient as humanity itself, rooted in our primal need to communicate our experiences, values, and lessons. It evolves from the oral tradition through written text, and now we have digital narratives that we're telling today. Storytelling has always played a critical role in shaping cultures, beliefs, behaviors, making it a powerful tool for businesses aiming to connect with their audiences on a deeper level. Now, as I go back and do just a couple more bullet points here, it starts with the oral tradition. You know, back in the day, people passed down stories. We hear of our grandparents having stories. Then it moved to the written form, you know, where folks were writing down their stories. The writing systems marked a significant evolution in storytelling and preserving stories. The modern era shifted it to TV and radio, and now we have a digital revolution with AI coming on. But, you know, the storytelling today still centers around authenticity, values, customer-centric narratives, where today storytelling places the customer at the heart of the narrative. And we have multimedia experiences, and Keith, I'm sure, is going to share his experiences and his knowledge on that. But the impact on sales is pretty remarkable. Businesses have leveraged storytelling to boost sales, and they should, by doing the following: building brand loyalty, compelling stories create emotional bonds to customers, differentiating themselves from competitors. In a saturated market, those who can tell a story can differentiate themselves. Enhancing perceived values. A good story can enhance a value of a product significantly, and driving engagement. Throughout history, the core of storytelling has remained constant: to connect on a human level. For businesses, the evolution of storytelling from the oral tradition to the digital narrative today has been about finding new and effective ways to forge these connections, demonstrating the enduring power of a good story to captivate and persuade. I'll say it again: to captivate and to persuade. So that takes us to why I'm so excited about this topic today: the art of brand elevation from storytelling to design. Now, let me introduce to you our guest, Mr. Keith Glantz. This is the first time I've had a guest with the same first name, the greatest name in the world, Keith. Keith brings over 20 years of brand experience to his team at Glantz. He leads an agency and gives directions to the creative and the technical teams. Keith believes that you shouldn't let your dream just be a dream, and I love that. He loves nothing more than helping ideas come to life, especially those with a purpose. Keith he comes with a degree from Washington University in St. Louis. He has a BSA, a BA, and he also has a BFA with honors in graphic communication. Keith, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello, and thank you, Keith. And I should say Keith 1. I'll be Keith 2 for today's conversation.
So you're doing pretty good. I love the background that you got back there.
Fantastic. Yeah, I appreciate my background, and it's very applicable as we start talking about brand and storytelling today, because this actually is part of my story. I know not everyone here on the podcast could see what's on my wall, but for those who do have the luxury to see some of these things, this item is representative of who I am. People get to immediately know a little bit of insight into what's in my noggin just by seeing on a wall, and sometimes that they identify some similarities, and it kind of sparks a conversation. So it's always been very helpful.
So let's start with who is Keith Glantz? Where do you come from? Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'll start with that right there. Here I am. I live in Chicago now, but my roots are New York. I grew up out east hence the Mets jersey.
Oh, you're a
So
New
I'm a
Yorker.
native New
Okay.
Yorker. I'm a New Yorker. That's why I tell people exactly how I see it. And been in the Midwest for quite a while. You said in the intro, I got 2 degrees. I got a degree in strategic marketing in my BSBA. I also got a BFA in graphic communication, specializing in advertising design. Been working in the advertising design web community for the last 25 years, which has been mostly fun. And I kind of got that marriage of those 2 degrees in truth because I didn't want to be a starving artist. I was
Okay.
always concerned. I always had a passion for the creative and entrepreneurial arts, but my parents kind of instilled into me, like, you don't really want to be a barista for your whole life, do you? Like, so go get yourself a real degree. So I kind of tried to understand the foundational thinking of how business would work. And instantaneously, I was like, yeah, finance, economics, maybe not.
Now, when did you
Marketing,
know? When did you know you were going to go into the creative side of business?
In
Before
college.
college or in college?
No, while I was in college. Absolutely,
Okay.
while I was in college. I mean, I was taking and studying all those classes, and it kind of prompted me to kind of get into that. But while I was in school, I was doing internships, and I started more as an art director on the creative side of things. But
Okay.
I was the person who also could be in that meeting, not just being the designer itself, but I could flip my hat around and be like, okay, now let's talk business KPIs and strategies. What's your goals? What's your objectives? What are your metrics here? Because I'm not just here to help you make it look good. I really am helping you here to sell your products. And people are like, wait, who is this kid? So instantaneously, I kind of recognized that I was a little bit of an anomaly from the creative side, talking business and kind of math around it. The
Okay.
tactics.
So let's start at the very beginning. Take us back to the beginning of Glantz.
Mhm.
I know it as Glantz Design. You and I have
Yeah,
a little bit of a history. I've seen you. I've seen your special sauce in
yeah,
at work.
sure.
What sparked the idea to start your own creative agency?
Yeah, no, we're going back to one of the last economic downturns of this century, but in September of 2008, for those who remember, the economy really wasn't great. And I was working at a good shop. Don't get me wrong, it was a good shop. And the work I was doing was just solid. It wasn't great. And the clients that I had were okay. They weren't awesome. And I kind of got to the point where I was like, you know what? I could do this. I could do this. I know I could do this better. So I incorporated, started my business out of the 3rd floor of my house, and I went off on my own. And a few months later, we were profitable, and I was like, "Whoa, this thing is."
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, so we were cash positive. Honestly, 3 months into my maturation of this company, but it was a combination of being able to talk strategy and talk design. I was a little bit of a 2 for 1. One person, they only had to pay one person, and I was kind of able to give them a little bit of a bonus. And since I was just incubating this company, I didn't have employees at the time when I first started, and shaped the business. And then over time, started to bring on people, new staff
Okay.
members. They were coming to my house. They were watching my kids grow because they were downstairs, and kind of shaped the people that I was actually hiring, because I'm like, want them around my children. So okay, yeah, you could come and get the gig. Um, but really, it was a combination of strategy and design.
Okay.
Most design firms have a number one goal of making things look good.
Yes.
No doubt
Yeah.
about it. And that's a great goal if you're a design firm.
Yeah.
In my case, that was my second goal. My
Was it?
most important goal
Okay.
was, yeah, every single business has a specific metric or goal that they're trying to achieve.
Okay.
Some cases it could be as small as signing up people for a newsletter, or getting people to listen to a podcast, or download a white paper, or buy a product online. That's your goal. Then design around that. Make sure
I
you
got
do not design first, because sometimes you hide the purpose of the reason why you're
and
designing.
and and maybe that's your secret sauce. I agree with you that people go to creatives to make things look pretty, give them designs, gives them
Yeah,
logos, and Was it difficult in the early days? Did you find businesses who didn't know how to tell a story? They had a good product, but they just didn't know how to digitally tell the story. Is that
Um,
where?
Actually, I will tell you the truth. I think it was easier back then.
Okay.
And I think it was because nobody had an expectation or understood what they were supposed to be doing. It was more that they didn't
Ah,
have it, or they just hadn't told it, or they hadn't shared it yet, or enunciated it. But once you kind of started digging in and asking people, it was it kind of just flowed, and it
okay.
definitely helped. Um,
So you think
so
it was easier back then, and but you make it look so easy now.
I wouldn't. There's a little bit of magic to the process, and I think process is important in understanding certain things and how businesses, will grow. Sorry, I
Hmm.
got distracted out the window. I see a woodpecker. That's probably the worst thing for a podcast to hear right outside your
No,
window.
I
Hopefully,
can't. I can't hear it. I can't hear it. But I
uh,
like.
yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think from the maturation of businesses and storytelling, it's not easy. It absolutely is not easy to get stuff, but you really need to understand what people's goals are. I mean, when you start thinking about design thinking, and by the way, we're not a design thinking firm whatsoever, but you really need to understand and go through that process of ideation all the way through testing,
Well,
right?
can you describe what it is? Because I'm interested. I have a couple of questions on how storytelling has changed or how you see it now to design thinking. I don't really. I think I have an idea of what it is, but you can
Yeah.
best explain it.
Okay, well, actually, let me back up and tell a story first, since we're talking about storytelling and we're talking
Okay.
about the
Let's.
origins.
All right. All right. All right.
Okay, so I'm going to predate Glantz. So, as I said, I started in September of '08, but the winter before, over Christmas break, I took at the time my two young daughters. Now I have three daughters, and they're not young anymore. But we went to Disney down in Florida, and you talk about the masters of storytelling. And we were after a long, exhaustive day. We were tired and beat, and we just sat down on a side of a curb on one of their roads, one of their thoroughfares.
Okay.
And my kids were eating popcorn, and I'd say every other bite was going in their mouth, and the others were on the floor.
On the floor.
And then go figure what just happened at Disney. A parade starts right in front of us. We had prime seats, front row, everything. It couldn't have been more dreamlike, having two little girls who were like, staring at the princesses that were walking by. And character after character goes by, and then all of a sudden they see the evil stepmother from
Okay.
Cinderella.
Okay.
And they see all the evil stepsisters, and they're scared. They're like, oh my God, there's the stepmom and this and that. And they come over to my oldest daughter, Sophie, and I look her right in the eye and I say, don't worry, Cinderella will clean that up. And they just kept on walking. And it didn't even miss a beat. And
Okay.
it dawned on her right away. She's like, oh my God, she really is evil. And she's telling me that Cinderella is going to clean up my popcorn mess that I made. And it hit me right then and there, as authenticity is not just something that you live on a screen. It's how you bring it out to the world. How do
Okay.
you how do you how do you get perceived out there? And you know these characters, because they're characters, let's be real, are
Yeah, they are.
portraying the
Right.
stepmom, but to a young child who doesn't know the difference between reality and dreams at that point, she was told, because the evil stepmom said that Cinderella's going to clean it up. You know what? Sophie's like, Cinderella's going to come by and clean this mess up. I want to wait here and see it.
Okay.
That never happened. But nonetheless, it was so authentic and so true that immediately I realized that you can't just brand an organization. You can't just brand a company. You actually have to brand yourself. You have to brand yourself as
Okay.
an individual
Okay.
too. And that's a really critical thing. So when you start thinking of these authentic stories and how it works, how does that portray down the line? So Yeah, I'll stop there for a second. I don't
No,
know. That's
no.
probably enough of them.
I like that. I think, as we get into the storytelling component of it, I can tell you that I love going to the movies because it allows me to escape. I love to just escape from the realities of the world. As I have become an entrepreneur and I've branded myself as a coach, as a serial entrepreneur, I recognize now and done some public speaking, people really do resonate with stories. And so, my question to you before we get into the design thinking compartment: who's doing it well now? What brands are doing it well now? What companies are doing it well now? And can a product? I think I'm answering my own question. Can a product be told have a great story, but the company has a terrible story?
Oh, in both cases, yes. Right.
Okay.
In both cases, yes. Um, oh man, who's doing it now? Um,
Apple.
well, yes, but I would say that they have a great technology that back in it, and their story's not changing. You know what? Actually, I'm going to throw out one that nobody expects me to say. You ready for
Okay.
this? It's
Yep.
Geico. It's Geico. And by the way, they're not my insurance company. They do not sponsor me.
Okay.
So maybe if they're listening, maybe they should throw me a bone. But no, in truth, what I've actually liked with them over the years, their perseverance. Okay, is so often people do these couple commercials every year and then they do a couple more. They're doing advertising online when you talk about these big brands, and they change because there's new marketing folk and new people on an organization that keep coming in every few years. But they have multiple campaigns. By the way, Allstate is doing a great job too with another insurance company,
Okay.
with the Mayhem man. I think he's actually awesome. Is that they've stuck it out. They've not, they've, their campaign, their, whether it's the chameleon or the gecko or the caveman, these brands have now grown up with organizations and people, and they've lasted, and they're more than just a single marketing person who's now been their brand manager or CMO for 3-5 years, because these have been the same campaigns for 10 years. There's immediate brand recognition that tells their story. You know what's going on.
I see.
And I've really liked the fact that they have stuck it out, because these organizations that spend millions, tens of millions of dollars marketing, let's just say at a Super Bowl commercial for a 30-second commercial, it's already forgotten. It's already forgotten. And you don't remember what was done a year ago or 2 years ago, but you know what? You know exactly what the Geico commercials are.
Well, here's my next question. I love a story, and I want to get into your process of helping companies tell a story. But I think I understand now when you say it's harder, because I think a story to a baby boomer is going to be told differently than a millennial, than a Gen Z. Now that's my bias. Now, as an expert in storytelling and creative design, do you agree with that?
I do, but I also think there's, in that same vein, there's also parts that are easier talking it to a younger audience as well.
Okay.
Because the question is how do they like to receive their stories? So you could talk about a baby boomer. Baby boomers are more.
No, go ahead.
Baby boomers grew up looking at the newspaper every day. They would read the articles in the press, right? They spend more time learning by that information. They're willing to invest a little bit more time to gather the data, the info, the read stuff. You said they went to the movies. They actually went to a place, right?
Yes,
They're not live streaming it on their iPad in their house, or on a cell phone while they're commuting downtown, with their headphones in their ears, and they're watching these little mini clips.
Okay.
Information now from a brand story is gotten easier and hard because there's so many different ways you could tell a story, whether it's through social media and videos and quick little snippets. The access has gotten a lot easier, but sometimes to tell a really long, elaborate story into these little 15, 30-second mini things are really challenging
I,
because the younger audience doesn't have the attention span.
I see.
And I'm not saying this to demean them. They really
I
don't.
understand.
As someone who's willing to invest more time to read and learn about something.
So then let's go through the process. I'm sure we have business owners and coaches and other folks who have product or and companies. You know, how should they engage someone like your organization? How should they do that?
Well, I mean, first things that I need to understand before I would ever engage with any particular company is, what are your goals? What would success look like to you? You have a reason why you're coming to an organization such as ours, and we want to help you achieve those goals. But if we don't know what they are, we're never going to help you achieve them. Right.
Okay.
So if you have a new product that you're trying to launch, or you're trying to build awareness, or every client says they're looking for more leads. Leads is a pretty common thing these days, right? How could we help you potentially achieve those things? We can't just say, flip the magic button and say, oh, there's 10 more leads for you. No, we need to understand and certain things. So that when you start thinking about the process and how to go through it, I mean, you really need to, whether it's stakeholder interviews or questionnaires or research, or you're really trying to understand the comprehensive understanding of how this all works. You can't be judgmental. You actually have to be very objective. You could have biases, but you got to understand why some of those biases take place. Then from there, you really need to help define it. And in many cases, we do a lot of work we call it persona work.
Okay.
But it's really understanding your users. Who are your users? Well, in some of those examples I brought up, they're trying to get new customers. Okay, well, a new customer is a type of user, but you could get deeper into the demographics and who those users are and what their roles are and what their challenges are. They all have different pain points.
Now, is it easier? You have B2B and you have B2C. Is it easier if it's a B2C relationship? And then because and the only reason I bring that up, and it's my intellectual curiosity, business to business is more complex because you're selling to more than one person, but it could be the same process. I wonder how you think about that.
I think it's definitely more complicated, and it's less about awareness. It's more transactional.
Okay.
You don't see B2B organizations putting up billboards. They just, it's rare. It's really rare. I mean, it does happen. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're going to see the Salesforces of the world, right? I mean, if you want to put them, they're putting out their billboards. But but there's so many different types of ultimate users who they're trying to sell and market it to. If I was selling orange juice, I know that every human being will potentially, unless you have an allergy to citrus, you're a customer. You're a potential thing. So I don't really have to specify if you're a young or you're an adult. Yeah, there may be different benefits if you want to infuse calcium for younger kids as their bones are growing. But guess what? You could market it the same way to the elderly because they need it. And I do think that there's a piece, but yeah, us as an organization, actually at Glantz, we for a long time, and you made mention that our name has changed since the maturation of our business. But we also made some changes to the organization and who we work with. We started as very brand agnostic. We will work with a variety of different organizations, B2C, B2B, B2G, government stuff. But
you didn't care. You just bring them on in. Gotcha. I understand.
No, but I'll tell you. But it was actually probably a dumb idea from a business perspective. But it was really, this is where I had that creative side of me. Okay. I didn't care. I wanted to. If I was only working on pharmaceutical stuff or even alcohol brands, as fun as that could be, after a short period of time of doing the same thing every day, it gets boring. In my case, now I got to work on such a variety of different sectors and industries. I've learned so much about everything. My wife tells me that, man, you should be on Jeopardy because you know nothing of importance, but you know a lot of useless facts, right? Okay. And it's because I've touched so many different brands, right? And I've done different industries, and I think it's a really critical thing. But when you start thinking about the companies now, what I was going to say is we as an organization have actually made a shift to focus on B2B. We have absolutely made that tier shift right now. And when we talk thinking about brand elevation in specific, I know that brand elevation to me is most businesses that want to elevate, you can use that actual word, they're at an inflection point.
Okay.
They've hit that milestone of, yeah, you know what? I think we're going to grow. Maybe they have a new product. Maybe there's a new leadership change. Maybe they have a launch that they want to put out there. This is a reason why, or maybe they want to sell their business. Maybe they want to be like, you know what? We need to prepare ourselves for acquisition. How are we going to go ahead and do this?
And how do you? I'm glad we're getting into the brand elevation component of it. How do you determine success? As a business owner, you got to hit my top line, but awareness is critical too. So what are you finding? How do you look at it? How do your clients look at it in terms of brand elevation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a million different types of outcomes out there that people have. And that's why I said from the get-go, I need to understand, what does success look like to you, right?
Okay.
Someone may be like, I only care if I'm talking to a head of sales from an organization, you know what their number one care is?
Sales.
I need to book meetings, book sales meetings,
Yeah.
book me those meetings. Okay. They don't care if I attract future employees or consistency across all the brand channels. But if I talk to another person in an organization, that may be their most important goal and their important metrics.
Gotcha.
So, CFOs have different goals than chief operating officers.
Ooh, that's so true.
Different goals than owners. They really do. Even they collectively have their KPIs at the leadership level. They definitely have different parts. Employee satisfaction, trust. If you're putting out new contests, how am I going to be perceived as a thought leader in the industry? I need to start doing certain things. Audience reach and could be another outcome that people are starting to do. But in order to be successful, I'm only successful when our clients are successful. So we need to help them achieve those goals. If they achieve those goals, then we are successful. That's my word.
So staying on the brand elevation for a second, explain design thinking. I would love to understand.
Well, design thinking is different than brand elevation, but design thinking is a process that can be used to help elevate the brand. So I started talking about it up front from understanding and interviewing and then getting into the persona work. But when you keep going further downstream in the design thinking, you got to start ideating after you've already done the personas and how you are prioritizing all that information and putting that out there. Then design thinking often works in the mindset of always in beta. It's prototypes. Put stuff out there. You're doing mock-ups. You're doing storyboards. You're trying to keep it simple. They like to say, what is it? Fail fast. If you know you're not going to succeed, just end it quick and start again. And that's really important in the idea of design thinking. But when you find something that works, go test it, get it out to the market, understand what's happening, why is it working, and then you know what? Start that process again. Go back into that thing that's working. Start interviewing, defining user core, and get to the idea of. So it's really that it's a circular process. Some people call it an infinity symbol too, but really it doesn't end. You kind of got to go through defining it to ultimately testing it. But to brand elevate or to elevate any particular brand, you really need to understand what is a brand? What does branding mean? This is also a misnomer that happens all the time. People come to us and say, hey, I just want to know a brand. I'm like, a brand is more than a logo design.
Yeah, it is.
Like, I just need a logo. Well, I got the logo right over my head. Well, what does that mean? Okay. Well, a logo sure is a depiction. Nowadays, it's also your icon on social media. It's your signature on your email.
It is.
It's the thing that you wear on a branded sweatshirt. I mean, people see it regularly. And brands they should not remain consistent. I mentioned I'm a sports fan, so yes, I have the Mets, but here I live in Chicago. So you could think of an old brand, Chicago Cubs, just for example.
Yeah.
I live on the north side of Chicago. They've been around for a long time. They've always been the Chicago Cubs. right? You probably know their logo. They got the circle C. Sometimes they've
Yeah.
used the school
Right.
bear. But if I asked
Right.
you, how many times do you think they've changed their logo in 100+ years of existence? How many times would you say?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say maybe 2 or 3. They've changed their uniforms a lot.
At least 15. At least
Wow.
15 times. And the reason I say it is it may not be a radical shift.
Yeah.
It may be a subtle tweak. It could be a changing of the color. It could be the topography, the way the fonts are put together. Businesses and organizations do make changes over time. You could look at the evolution of Coca-Cola's logo or Ford Motor Company's logo or all these different companies
Oh,
out
you did
there,
bring up a good point here. Because I'm
right?
sitting there thinking of Nike. I'm sitting here thinking of Apple. Those logos have been around for a while, and I just want to make sure I understand. You're saying that companies should change their branding, and can you elaborate on that? Why? Why is that?
Uh, it's not that they have to change, but times change, right? The complexities change.
Okay.
So Apple, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I could visualize 5 or 6 logos in my head from the beginning of time. I mean, it was very ornate when it started in the mid 70s. I mean, it was almost hand done. Then they had the rainbow stripes when they kind of introduced the original Mac and,
Yeah.
you know, right? I mean, it was pretty clever. And then it went into the metallic sign. In the early 2000s, everything was dimensionalized with glows and this, and then they wanted to follow a trend, and then it went to flat. Businesses want to appeal to the mass market, right?
Yes,
But
they
they also
do.
want to establish. They also want to make sure that they maintain consistency and stay relevant. And in order to stay relevant, it's not just the logo mark itself, it's the story that goes into the brand. Who are you? What do you represent? What's important about your organization? What's the story that you're going to put out there? Um, I think of these purposeful driven brands, whether it's the Patagonias of the world or the Tom's shoes, right? That
Right.
go out there and do such great things. You all know those stories, but you know what? It's those things that drive their sales. People are so brand loyal because they love their story, maybe even more so than some of their products.
That is a
So,
very good point. Oh yeah, okay. I see what you mean now. And so when we tell a company that's going to tell a good story, does it matter the channel used? You got Twitter, you have TikTok, you have Facebook, LinkedIn, snail
yeah,
mail, email,
yeah.
TV, radio. Is one better than the other? Because to
Um,
me, TikTok's kicking everybody's butt in terms of reach. Now, you may have a different perspective. Um, and I say that reluctantly because they got 175 million people seem to be staying off of it, but it seems to be effective.
Oh no. I mean, I use TikTok, but I'm also a father of 3 kids, and I kind of do it to make sure I keep an eye out on them. But listen, all those social channels have significant merit for a different audience. As I said, there are different users that you're trying to reach.
Okay.
So I'll just pick my brand, for example. And by the way, that's an awful example, but we'll pick Glantz. We use Facebook, we use LinkedIn. So, and we also use Instagram. Instagram to me is showcasing our employees and our culture. That's for employee acquisition. I'm trying to showcase who we
I
are as a company through
gotcha.
LinkedIn, and people start to see that. And if they were ever going to check us out, you better believe they want to know who we are before they would ever want to work for our company, right? LinkedIn to me is about all our professional credibility and our case studies and our thought leadership. And that is very much geared towards client acquisition or referrals, people sharing information, thought leadership. And then you can start thinking about the Facebooks of the world or the Metas. And that's a repository of information. We're putting that out there for the masses in most of the cases. And there's a lot of loyalty and brands that people follow on Facebook. But there's usually a personal connection. Maybe I'm a user of the product. It really works very well in B2C. B2B
Gotcha.
on Facebook is a little bit tougher. Um, and yeah, X, Twitter, whatever you want. I mean, in real time information, great. But I love TikTok. I think it's awesome. And I think it has a great merit, and some organizations are doing a fantastic job on that. And
well, and I see your point. What I'm hearing you say, it depends on what you're trying to do. I didn't think about the story you're telling for your company, for LinkedIn. I'm thinking of small businesses, the folks that I consult with who are, trying to increase their value. And, as a creative and a glance, it would be interesting. Do you think that the old methods are still effective? And what I mean by old methods, mail, email, because depending on who you listen to, AI is going to take over. And has AI impacted your business? But let's not deal with that one first. Yeah. But let's deal with the old methods first.
Yeah, you know what? So there's traditional methods and there's also the old methodology. But when you start talking about direct mail, like cards that show up in they actually do work. Yeah, sure. I certainly look at that stuff and I almost toss some of it straight to the garbage. But when I get handwritten notes these days or like personalized information, that's the first thing I open because it's directed towards me. It's targeted. When you start thinking about the new/old methodology, email marketing, I got to tell you, that to me is the greatest marketing tool that any organization should be taking advantage of because it has the highest ROI.
Okay.
The cost to do it and usually to attract a customer or prospect is negligible compared to other methodologies. Okay. So I would highly endorse people to use some type of email marketing system out there. No doubt about it.
Gotcha.
By the way, it doesn't have to be just customer acquisition. It could be to your customers. We have or employee communications. If you're a big 10,000 plus company, just talking to yourselves is a marketing feed in its own right? How do you communicate what's happening in this facility or that office, or here's what's happening? Well, email marketing is the way to go. So doing employee comms in that regard, really, really important.
Now, before we get to the AI portion of this, is there a recipe to storytelling from your perspective?
Be authentic, be real. Always know and have a point in advance. So years ago, I'm pretty privileged. I was part of an organization called Vistage, and I sat through a presentation, and a guy talked about a story bank.
Okay.
And the story bank really made you think about different times in your life that you may need to recall a story. Everyone else, people that like, I got a story for this, I got a story for that. Really is, how do you talk about a story for perseverance? How do I talk about a story for authenticity, which I just, by the way, pulled one out earlier when I talked about the evil stepsister.
Yeah. You
should have stories for particular types of things in the back of your mind. Not just an individual, but companies should have that. And how do I go about doing that? You've heard businesses have elevator pitches.
Yeah, they do.
Escalator pitches. That's a really short version of an elevator, right? I used to say I'm like climbing up to the top of the World Trade Center or One World Trade Center, or am I going on a 3 flat, right? Like how much time do I have?
And I always say those folks that rise to the top seem to be the best communicators, and people can immediately connect with you when you're able to borrow in emotionally. And I think of people who are great communicators like a Bill Clinton, Steve Jobs. I mean, there are some people out here who are just gifted that way. And from a business standpoint. So that's why I asked you about recipe, because, there are some people listening here and say, oh, I'm a coach, or I have this product. I need to tell a story, but there's, is there a proper way to do that? And then you said authenticity. So,
well, I mean, look, I'm not writing a movie here and where you have to have a perfect parabola of a storytelling arc. But there absolutely is a way to do storytelling. So, and there is different recipes, again, depending on what you're ultimately trying to do. If I'm a business and I am presenting a capabilities presentation to a prospect, or I'm looking to get an investor deck, or if I'm a business trying to sell it, I'm doing this. They're presenting something, right? They're sharing a story. And you have to look at that not just as this is the information that I want to present, but imagine it, how the audience is looking at it and be like, is this information that really resonates with me? And how do I want to receive that information? And what's the story? So we get to work with organizations regularly and be like, you know what? I got to tell you, like, that's a great story, but you know what? Slide 14, move that before slide 11, and slide 11 now. Actually, let's break that up into 3 slides,
Gotcha.
because you can tell a better story by communicating something differently, and it doesn't have to be chronological. It may be in your head where you're telling a story that it has to happen in the exact process.
Me.
Like, no, nobody knows that it actually happened in that order. This is going to make a better story, right? And
that's how my brain works, chronological.
I mean, and you know what? I'm an art guy, but I'm also a math guy. I said I have a business degree, and so it does kind of give me that linear approach. But I've learned that you can sometimes, if you have a sequence of a lot of pluses in the middle, it still equals the same answer at the end, whether the second, third, or fourth variable changed. It's still the same thing. But the sequence could change and dictate how you ultimately do the work, and it could be more efficient.
What's the future of storytelling? I mean, in my opening, I shared about oral, written. We're in this digital phase, and what are you looking at? How do you look at the future?
Oh man, well, you also brought up AI, and I know your last podcast you had 2 phenomenal speakers related to AI, and that's definitely taken over a fair amount. Content creation is definitely. It has. Content creation is absolutely. I mean, remember, AI is all about data and data inputs, and you could put stuff out there, and I think it's a really good tool for putting out synopsises and kind of outlines. And it's been very helpful for me and my team to be able to craft some information to actually give us ideas.
Okay.
Help us generate ideas, not do the work for us.
Gotcha.
Generate ideas. People are like, are you scared that AI is going to take over your work? I'm like, no. And they're like, why? I'm like, because clients can never tell me what they want. Until clients can tell me exactly what they want, they can't. The thing is the thing with AI and technology is you need to know what inputs to put in. What are the variables that I'm typing in?
Very true.
I am writing those content to be able to write those inputs now. Those inputs are helping me create certain kind of parameters around objectives, and then I help rewrite certain things based on that. But content is not just written, it's visual too. I mean, it's video, it's movement, it's motion graphics, animation. I mean, we do a ton of web design and development, and it's incorporating all of those pieces together.
Yeah.
And
you brought up a very good point. I was thinking that it wasn't going to impact your business, but it is creative because I use ChatGPT. I've looked at some things, and quite honestly, it's just like a computer. If you don't know how to interact with it, you're not going to get anything out of it. So, I like how you're interacting with it. And you also said something I thought was pretty important. People don't really know what they want if it's the future, right? They know what they need, what you show them. But when you look at your client base, how much of your client base is future focused versus now? And what I mean, do you understand what I mean by that?
Okay. Do I ever? I wish more were future thinking. So many are reactionary, or this is what I feel like I have to do, not what I need to do. And when you start thinking about tactics, people come to us, I need to build this. I need to have a website. I must have a website, right? Or I want to do this, right? And there's a difference between a need and a want.
Please do explain.
So
from your standpoint,
many times people talk about, and I don't want to spend too much time getting into that because that could be a whole nother podcast. But in truth, that people don't really comprehend what is over the trees, what's going to be coming up. So they're like, okay, I have a budget, I have this, I need to do this or that. And again, they're only looking at their specific tasks, and they're not necessarily looking at their 3, 5, 10-year picture of where we're headed as a company. When you start thinking about brand elevation, and I actually think this is where brand elevation makes the most sense for companies is it's not just singular tactical things. It's not just saying, I need to do a social media campaign, or I need to do email marketing, or design a new website. It's how do they all work together? How do they all work together? 1 + 1 does not equal 2 when it comes to brand elevation. It's a little bit of art and science and a little bit of magic where there's a multiplier effect. When you get all of these things working together in unison, working to elevate a brand, your brand will grow significantly. But if you just do one-offs, yeah, you could put together a nice little email marketing campaign, but if you're not consistent to your brand, it's not going to work. Right.
Well,
so I think that's a really critical thing.
I hear you on that. And is that because people forget quickly? What's creating that? I mean, I'll stop there.
No, I think people are driven for immediate success. They want to see stuff that happens now. We're in a very, that's the great thing of having a cell phone. Information is right there. I don't have to go much longer to do this. But sometimes you do have to wait to see the maturation of success.
Gotcha.
You got that proverbial snowball. When you start to do something, it picks up steam and momentum.
Gotcha.
And I think that's really, really important. The other thing is to, one of our core values as a company is to ask why and then ask again.
Yeah.
Okay. And to be honest, that's because curiosity is essential to creativity. Okay. And you can never do this without uncovering those new opportunities. If you don't ask why repeatedly to really get into the nuances or the meaning behind why things are important, it will never be successful. And when I'm talking to marketing folks that represent an organization, and by the way, sometimes it's not marketing folks, sometimes it's CFOs, COOs,
right,
other people that are filling that role or that seat. They may or may not have that answer, and they're aimed at their silo. I'm specifically focused on this, so this is what's critically important to me. I'm like, you're completely neglecting security and IT or HR or whatever it would be, and so I think that's really, really important. But
well, Keith, we are at the end. I thank you for being a guest. Let me give you the last word. Anything you want to say to our listeners about your world, storytelling, how they find you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Keith. So yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and thank you all for listening. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much, but my last name is Glantz. You can find us at glantz.net, glantz.net. Happy to chat with anybody as you do about anything. But what I would tell everybody out there is don't just go into any brand storytelling or even thinking that you're going to elevate a brand without defining what your goals are. If you don't have metrics, if you don't have tangible outputs, then they are just to-dos. They need to be goals. Okay, well, so make sure you have actionable stuff.
Well said. Thanks for listening to The Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Keith D. Terry. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support this podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and a review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on my YouTube channel at Keith D. Terry. If you want to recommend a guest, please email me at info@terryperformancegroup.com. This has been produced by your host and Jade Productions.